Hey, welcome to Victims and Villains. If you guys are new to our content, we create content like what you're watching, or in this case, listening to right now, simply to educate and engage individuals like yourselves on mental health awareness and suicide prevention through pop culture. My name is Captain Nostalgia. I'm a writer, podcaster, and the director of our film festival entitled Horrific Hope, the first film festival of its kind to be horror-centric and mental health focused. If you guys would like more information about that and where to submit your nightmares, including screenplays, short films, and feature films, links are in the descriptions below, along with where you guys can find our social media, podcasts, more movie reviews like this one, and most importantly, our mental health resource library. Today we're going to be talking about the movie Fall, which stars Grace Fulton and Virginia Gardner, and Jeffrey Dean Morgan is in this movie, but I'll talk about him in just a few minutes. This movie tells the story of two best friends who experience grief. One is now a widower. This is played by Fulton, and on the opposite end of this, you have Gardner's character who, in response to grief, I'll talk about this a little bit more in our mental health section, she becomes a rising internet star by doing extreme adrenaline-seeking stunts. And the two of them essentially climb upon the fourth tallest construct in the United States, which is an old abandoned broadcasting tower, and are stranded on there. Let me just start off by saying this movie as a whole has its moments, but falls flat in a lot of ways. And let me just start off by saying that when the movie focuses on the shots of the two actresses falling or being in any kind of danger, the adrenaline and the anxiety that they produce are real. And they are just so well done. The anxiety and the way that this movie pulls you to the edge of your seat is unmatched. It's been a long time since I've ever actually seen anything like this take shape or even really have any kind of intensity. I think this movie does intensity really well. On top of that, it also has these really gorgeous backdrop shots that Mann, the director on this one, just does a really good job. Honestly, the way that this movie uses the natural light, sunsets, sunrises, the mountain air, the desert scenery, on top of just the lighting and the way that certain shots are set up, it feels a little bit like David Lynch's The Straight Story. I might be the only person in existence to make that comparison, but I really enjoyed the backdrop and the scenery of this film. It's absolutely gorgeous. And then on the flip side of that, you have the really cruddy CGI that this movie brings. And I just want to say that the start of this movie, the prologue, so to say, is essentially the three characters, Fultz, Gardner, and Mason Gooding, who plays Fultz's now deceased husband. It is kind of like they're going out rock climbing, and he essentially falls to his death. Anytime that there are certain sequences that showcase him falling or dangling from said mountain is some of the worst CGI that I have seen in recent years. It is very offensive that we are still in 2022 and seeing CGI this bad. It feels like it came out of 1995. And there are certain sequences that, as the movie goes on, the CGI, you still see it, but it's very far and few between. It's not as predominant, which is something that I really enjoyed, and I'm really glad that they kind of started to walk away from the CGI in this movie. I think it's probably the smartest move that they were able to make. And then on top of that, let me just say the setup for this movie is really well done. I think aside from the death sequences and kind of the characters grieving after a year apart, and the very brief cameos that we get from Jeffrey Dean Morgan in this movie, setup for this movie, it works really well. I think that Fultz and Gardner have really great chemistry. The two of them together on screen just feel natural. And I would love to see like a buddy comedy with the two of these actresses in it. I think they work really well off each other. Then fast forward to once the movie kind of gets the set up, and this movie, the first act goes very quickly. It's very fast. But then once you actually get on top and the women get stranded, it then turns into some just very, very bad CGI and some really, really bad just melodrama stuff that just doesn't need to be involved and has no place in this movie. Like, they tried to like finagle the storyline and the chemistry between the two actresses, and the melodrama of this feels like a CW screenplay. And then once it gets set up and all the melodrama and all the intensity stuff gets started, then it feels like a TV pilot. It becomes very cheap. The quality of it diminishes very fast. And I would say that all in all, there's about 25 salvageable minutes in this movie. And those are the shots where they're doing anxiety. The scope is very cinematic. The characters' arcs are very well done. And I also want to say that while I do think that there are some semblance of depth for these character journeys, the characters themselves feel very paper thin. Like, there is nothing remarkable about these characters. They feel very right offable, if I can say that as a word, and just fall flat on, pun intended, very, very just terrible. So I will say that this movie, like I said, I'm going to go ahead and give this movie a 2 out of 5. I think this movie has decent acting. It sets up its shots really well, but all in all, the things that really, really kill me about this movie is the melodrama aspects of it that literally have no place in this movie. The bloated runtime, this movie just feels like it runs on forever, and it's only 107 minutes, but you feel that throughout the entirety of it. But it does anxiety really well, and I want to put this trigger warning that if you struggle with anxiety and you're interested in this movie, you're probably better off skipping it, or if you're going to see it, don't see it in the theater, because the theater really heightens the scope of the film and the height of which these two actresses and two characters are taking place on. So if you guys have seen Fall, what did you guys think about it? Let me know in the comments below. But let's talk about mental health. If you guys are new to our content, Mental Health Moment is where we take a theme of mental health from the film of which we are talking about in hopes to deconstruct the stigma surrounding mental health. And for this one, we look at our two main characters, and as I said in the prologue, it shows all three characters that are just together, and you have the Fultz character and you also have the Gardner character, and they show two extreme responses to different grief. Fultz disappears into alcoholism and just completely isolates herself from the rest of her people, and then on the opposite end, you have Gardner, whose character literally dives into just trying to push herself as close to death as possible. And it reminds us that grief and the grieving process isn't a one-size-fits-all type of thing, for one. And for two, it also teaches us that grief doesn't have an expiration date. But with saying that, a part of what brings Fultz's character out of the alcoholism portion of her story and into the sobriety and kind of really being the lead actress of this movie, I will also have to say that it comes from the fact that here you have a character that is very much essentially establishing herself to be you know, hey, I'm going to get you out of this grief and I'm going to bring you out of this struggle that you're currently in. And I think that that's also another important aspect of grief is to, while grief doesn't necessarily have an expiration date, it does wonders for our mental health to also bring people in our circles that are going to help pull us out of it, or that are going to help grieve with us. So that way we're not isolating ourselves, or we're not getting into alcoholism or drug abuse or any other sort of addiction or self-harm, and we're naturally doing life with people. And so surrounding yourself with the community is incredibly important. And I just want to encourage anyone listening, or in this case, listening to this, just to remember that you're not alone. And that if you or someone you know is going through a grieving process, that's okay. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel any semblance of that journey, and to just surround yourself with people that are going to be encouraging and challenge you to grow throughout that entire process. So once again, as usual, if you or someone you know is listening to this and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, click the links in the descriptions below to check out our mental health resource library. Fall is now playing in theaters everywhere from Lionsgate. Thank you guys for watching, and make sure that you guys hit that subscribe button.